So we're so happy to be talking with you today about sacred space and what that means to us in our life and in our work. Everything we do in a circular way. And whenever we work, whether it's for a healing session or a course or a ceremony, we start with making a circle, making space. And so this is really the beginning of the work for us. And we have a whole talk on the power of the circle, so where you can listen to more about that. But I wanted to talk a little bit, start off by talking about sacred space, by talking about the circle. And for me, what happens is that we set up a center. That's what we do first. We set up the center. And then we begin to set up the circle around it. And as people come into the ceremony or to the course or to the healing work, this circle begins to gather around the center. And as we do that, we create space, holding space within the circle. But there's also this space created through the relationship of the center and the circle, and everything that happens in between, in that wonderful space in between the center of the circle. And even when we are working at home, maybe we have a client, so there's only 3 humans in the room. We always set it up as a circle. We always try and invite the space as a circle and invite the spirits into the circle. And so we don't do any work before we have established the space. And there is a very simple reason for that, is because if I don't make space in my life, in the physical room and in my heart for the spirits to come in, how can they help us? And so in a way, I feel my job as the human is to come with my heart filled with intention, gratitude, and longing for the work. And then I have an intention that I call to the spirits, and then I hold the space. And for me, when I work, that's pretty much what I do. I send out the intention, I call the spirits, I make the connection, and I hold the space. And then within that, they do the work. And so in a way, you could say that pretty much 80% of what we do once we've called the spirits in is holding the space.
It's really true. I remember one time I got an amazing surprise. I was invited to a conference in Newcastle in England. And they wanted me to do a talk in the morning, and in the afternoon they wanted me to do a workshop on shamanic healing. And I said, okay, but we can only have 30 people in the workshop. And well, they let in about 60 people, and that was quite a surprise. But what a beautiful space that was. What a beautiful, wonderful energy there was too. And every one of those people, I would have thought that they were all very experienced in doing shamanic work, and it was a wonderful time we had. But the space within that circle was so wonderful that, in fact, I got a letter from the woman that we did the healing for 3 months later, and the symptoms of her rather serious ailment disappeared immediately and hadn't come back. So that was wonderful. But it doesn't really matter if you have 6 or 60 or 600. Of course, it feels good if there's 600, I guess. I'm waiting for that day. But it also feels good with 3 or 2 or 1, because it's never just 1. It's 1 plus the universe.
And This is something that we'll come back to in a little while, about how that when we gather, we remember that it's not just the humans that are gathered there.
Mm.
But I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying. You reminded me about um, some people, some humans have not really had a lot of experience of sitting in a circle. And I remember right in the beginning of my shamanic training years and years ago, I almost didn't go because the thought of sitting in a room with other humans in that way was just so unfamiliar to me, and I didn't know what it was going to be like. Sitting with the spirits wasn't so difficult, but sitting with other humans was a little bit more challenging. And so we find that there is something really important about learning to sit in circle together as humans, and not really trying to do anything too much as we do that, but just feeling the experience of sitting in a round way, of sitting together around a center with intention of gathering together in this way. And then, of course, we do work. And but the experience of feeling how it is that it's possible to sit together in that kind of way, just that can be very healing for a lot of people, and very inspiring and very rooting. And so for those of you, many of you listening have done that many times in many different types of ways, and not just in shamanic circles, but all types of circles. And so I'd like to make an invitation to you and think about how you might bring the power of that healing space into your life more in simple ways, maybe at work, maybe at home, maybe in other spaces you go to. Are there ways that you can subtly reshape how you meet so that you sit in a circular form more than in a square, linear, hierarchical form? And it doesn't even have to go any further than that. But I think that in itself is really interesting, how we invite the space of the circle into our lives. And thank you, John. We'll get back to solo practice and sitting in circle with the spirits and nature in a little while. And that's a really great thing. And we'll do some more work on that as well towards the end of the talk. So just very much bringing the power of the circle and the healing space of the circle into your human communities, and maybe in very simple ways. So I'd really love to leave that invitation with you. And if you do find that you want to do little experiments with that, and you want to tell us about it, feel free to email us, because we really love to hear about how the healing space of the circle can spread. Yeah.
But it's this thing about a lot of people talk about creating sacred space, and I always thought that was an interesting way of expressing it. And for me, I always sort of more look at it as recognizing sacred space. And I got a great teaching this about 40 years ago. Time flies. And I was walking with a friend of mine out in the forest in beautiful Deer Haven outside of Copenhagen, Deer Park. And we came to sit down on a log. It was a tree that had fallen in the storm. And we were sitting there quietly, and there were some deer nearby. And we didn't want to disturb them. And so we were quite quiet. And after about 3 minutes of sitting there, my friend said, "It's right there." And I looked over at him, and he was pointing at the ground in front of us, about 2 meters in front of us. And I looked at him, and before I could say, "What's right there?" he said, "The center of the universe, it's right there." And it was one of these mind expanding moments, right? And I fell off the log. I was laughing so hard, and the deer didn't seem to notice. It was wonderful. But I finally got up and on the log again, and he looked at me a little bit indignantly, and he said, "Well, it might as well be there as any place else, right?" And again, I fell on the ground in laughter, but it was joyful laughter because the truth of what he said was so overwhelmingly liberating. And no matter where we are, we're in the center of the circle.
And I love this phrase about recognizing
Mm.
sacred space rather than necessarily creating it. We can recognize it and then step into it. But of course, we can also call it to us, have an intention to want to step into it. And one of the things I really love to talk about this is, for me, shamanic work in the way that we do it is very much about recognizing the so-called invisible, what we do not normally see with our physical eyes, and honing and opening our senses, our whole being senses and our spirit senses, so that we can begin to see beyond the physical. This is a really big part of the essence of spirit work for me. And we often talk about looking with your spirit eyes at a situation. And you can do this in many different ways. And for me, sacred space is the same. It's not always visible physically. Now, if we're sitting in a circle with humans with a physical altar in the center, of course we can see that. But actually, that's just the sort of representation, the physical manifestation. That's not really the space. And so for me, working with sacred space is another way of really stepping into this way of being where we very much put our attention on the non-visible, on the so-called invisible, on the other than physical. And that we recognize that. And that's why I love this word. And of course, to recognize, the Latin root of the mean recognize is to recognize, to come to know again, right? It's not just to see, but it's to come to know again. It's, I see you because I know you. That for me is what recognize means. And so if I've never been taught about sacred space or its possibility or its existence, how can I see it? But there it is. And so this is for me is a way of recognizing the value of that which we don't normally see in the physical world and making room for that in our life. And for me, the more space I make for the spirits in my life, the more they can come in and help me. And often I find that the space I make for them is about this big or this big, you know, or this big. And then they have to really push through. And so again, some of my own work and my own practice when I ask for help for myself is about simply opening and expanding and making space for them to come in. It's so simple. And it's one of the best ways to start is just to have a wish to make space. And then we're going to talk a bit later on about how to hold that space in different ways.
Yeah, when you said the best way to start, right? I in my mind I finished your sentence with is to stop. Right.
The best way to start is to stop.
Yes, yes. I have to remember that one. I like that. It's a wonderful teaching, and it's not always easy, but this teaching that I had in the forest with my friend, it was easy to see there in the deer park outside of Copenhagen. But if you're walking in sort of a neglected part of a city, it's not so easy to see or to feel. But the center of the universe is there also. And so this practice is really a very basic, uh, basic in the way of a foundation practice, right? The practice of uh, stopping so that you can start, right? And recognizing that we are very lucky that we live in the middle of the forest. It took me 65 years to get back to the country. I was brought up in the countryside, and I finally moved back here when I was 65. And a friend of ours came and helped us do a lot of work, and we went away to teach a workshop, and he stayed here and was doing a lot of work. And when we came back, um, there was a little surprise because he was a very strong man, physically very strong, and he had found uh, a stone that was perfect for a standing stone. Oh, and it wasn't 2 meters tall. No, but it was about 80 centimeters, I guess, 3 feet roughly. And he erected it in a place that he felt was the right place to have it standing there. So we came back from 2 weeks of teaching, and there was the standing stone, right? And this standing stone is such a beautiful reminder for me. And I'm so lucky that I see it 100 times a day. And every time I see it, it's telling me, the center of the universe is right here, too, right? And giving me that reminder. And so that when I have to go to town, I can take that reminder with me into town.
And we have a comment here about what to do if you're working in a soulless office. And it's really interesting, this word soulless, and I find personally when I talk with people who don't have an interest in spirits and find maybe the word spirit a little challenging or off-putting, I often speak with them about the word soul instead. And I find that a lot of humans um, have a much easier relationship to the word soul than the word spirit. Soul is something that many people recognize, even if they don't have any kind of spiritual or religious practice. And it's interesting to note how much the word soul and soulless is in sort of normal, standard, mainstream vocabulary. And so when we say, oh, it's so soulless here, it might be because it literally is. And so then whether we're in a soulless office or in a space that doesn't feel very good, maybe at home, in a room, then there is an invitation, again, to make space. And so when we say make space, it's not necessarily to create the space, but to open it up. And so if you already have a shamanic practice, if you already have an established relationship with some spirit helpers, then you can ask, how can I make sacred space in the office? How can I begin to make sacred space in my bedroom or in the kitchen? And so it's not either or. It's not like over here it's great and here it's terrible. Everything is everything all the time. And so this is a real invitation to see, maybe you start small, maybe there'll just be a little bubble of sacred space beginning to grow in that soulless office. And you can ask maybe what you need to bring there, or something that you can do there that will just open a bit of sacred space. And that's not to do any work. That is just to bring some soul back into that area. And I remember years ago, I read this article by a shamanic practitioner in America, in the USA. And it's one of the most inspiring shamanic articles I've ever read. And it stayed with me so long. And I'll see if I can dig it out and put it somewhere. share it maybe in some way on our Osbaka Facebook, maybe I'll see. But very short story is that she was working in the canteen of a school, making food for the children. And she was telling in this article about how they didn't have much money. They had a very small budget. The quality of the food they brought in was very poor. And a lot of the meat was very low grade meat from animals that had suffered a lot in the process. And neither the children nor the adult teachers and staff were particularly keen on eating in this place. And so she found out what she could do. She couldn't leave her job. She couldn't afford to leave her job. And so she began working with that space, and she asked what she could do. And the article tells about her work with doing soul retrieval for the animals and working with the space, not in changing in any way that sort of pushed anything on anybody else, but just her relationship with the space. And she brought her relationship with her spirits into that space, and it became much more sacred through that work and that relationship. And it's an amazing article about what you can do to change a space, to change a workplace. And she wasn't foisting her own personal practice on anybody. She was just bringing it in with a really clean heart, doing her work in that space. And it had this beautiful ripple effect on the space around her. And so that people actually wanted to come and eat them more. The food had much more energy in it, and the workplace became more connected. So it's there is a lot we can do when we remember that we can actually ask for help to bring the sacred into the everyday.
Good. And so I just happened to notice Fiona O'Neill's question there, and I think you really answered it beautifully. So,
would
yes.
you like to say a bit more about that?
Mm,
so the question is about recognizing the center core between the external sacred space and our core embodied sacred space. We're going to come to that later in the talk, so I'm not going to talk about it right now.
No, but in a way, you just did talk about it.
Yeah.
Because that's what that the woman who was doing the cooking, that's what she was doing. You know, she was bringing her sacred core to that place, right? And this is such a really important teaching, especially for where we are right now in the history of the world, right? And having just said that, I gotta say that where we are right now in the history of the world is exactly the same place we've been since history started. My life is very short in comparison to the history of the world, but like there have been so many times in my short life where I have felt, oh my God, we're right on the brink, right? And I remember talking with my father and mother. They experienced Pearl Harbor, and I was just an infant. I wasn't even born when Pearl Harbor happened. I was born 5 days later. So, and talking to my grandparents, you know, and they all had these times in their life where it just didn't seem like it could get any further without the bubble bursting. And these are the times when we have to remember this wonderful connection that we do have and manifest it, just like the woman working in the kitchen, right? Because it changes everything. It changes everything.
And I think I can speak for both of us when I say that a lot of our spirit work and practice is about how we walk in the world, how we walk in the world. And we very much, as we talk about in the shamanic healing talk, we never do any work for people who don't ask for it. And we do not see it as our role to go deciding what healing needs to happen where. But what we do is we carry ourselves and our connection in the world in a way that maybe has some ripple effect. And so we'll again come to that, how you carry this sacred space inside you a little later on. But I just wanted to mention that because a lot of people that come on courses, certainly in this more kind of industrialized Western world, if we should say that, their focus is very much on a kind of identity. You know, they want to know who is a shaman and am I a shaman, and calling yourself a shaman. And for me, that is of limited interest. It's of some interest, but it's of limited interest. I'm much, much more interested in how can I live in a shamanic way. And what happens then is I stop thinking about myself and how great I am or how great I'm not, or, you know, how great I should be, or, you know, does anybody else think I'm a shaman? It just doesn't matter, you know, because what matters is, am I living in a shamanic way? Am I living in the way that my spirits have taught me? It's not this focus, you know, in the Western world, we're very focused on our individual identity rather than in the way that we live, in the way that we walk in the world. And so I really, really would invite you to stop worrying about who is a shaman, who isn't, and whether you are and whether not, and not even consider that, but consider, how do I walk in the world?
Yeah, that's really it. You're a human being, you know, and the human being has the potential of being an absolutely amazing, wonderful animal, right? And so, uh, you know, when I was a kid, and I guess with a lot of people still, if you call somebody an animal, that was considered an insult. Somebody calls me an animal, I feel good all over, right? And because then I feel my relationship with all these people around us, right? But the awareness of our beautiful capabilities, you know, and every once in a while, of course, I'm certainly no angel, and I get very upset about things sometimes. And I get so full of my upsettedness that I actually think that that's who I really am, you know? And actually, I've come to see that as that's me teaching me about who I could be instead of that upset person, right? And uh, we need all kinds of teachers. We really do.
And some years ago, you were introducing me to this practice that I think your spirit sort of taught you about the small heart and the big heart.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about
You go ahead. You go ahead.
And when we were mainly talking about that between the two of us.
Right. It's when we were getting to know each other.
Yeah,
Right.
working out the relationship, you know, getting to know each other better. And it became very, very helpful, just in a human way, to ask each other, is that your small heart speaking or your big heart speaking?
Which is really an irritating question to get thrown at you, but boom, it stopped me right in my tracks every time.
And it's not meant, it's not a question that you're meant to throw in someone's face, but in relationship to space, what I found very interesting, because we came to feel about it, it wasn't like small heart bad, big heart good. It was more like, here is the little heart, and it's all tight and crying and
Poor
angry.
me.
And then here is the big heart, you know, holding the little heart and just being able to encompass it and in a slightly more expanded way, being able to hold the space around the small heart so it can be heard, so it can be breathed, so it can be held. And just that possibility of moving from the small heart, which is often a kind of a painful place, constricted place, into a slightly bigger heart that can just hold that in a very compassionate way. That was very helpful for us many times, I
Yes.
remember. And
Yes.
then the spirits would hold our big hearts even bigger,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 So,
It's very, very true.
mm.
Yeah. We're talking about sacred space. Yeah. And when the spirits hold you, that's when you're really experiencing sacred space.
And one of the things I was thinking about recently was very often when we talk about connecting with the spirits or starting a piece of shamanic work, and the way that it's very often talked about in a lot of literature is that we make a shift in consciousness. And we talk about this a lot too. And then I was thinking about it from a perspective of sacred space instead. And I think, well, when I begin a piece of work, it's not only that I shift my consciousness, that certainly happens, but it's also that I open the sacred space around me. And in a way that again takes the attention away from what I do and reminds me that it's not just about me, it's about everything that comes together for the work to happen. And so I find this is a very interesting thing, that not just to think, oh, now I'm shifting my consciousness, but as you're stepping into a piece of work, put your attention not so much on yourself, put your attention on the sacred space, on how you create it. And we're going to talk more about that in detail in a while, and how it opens up in front of you, how you feel it, how you begin to connect to it, and how you step into it, how you become aware of it as you're opening yourself up to it.
Yeah, I think again, going back about 40 years or so, first time I heard this phrase, we're all connected. And when I'm feeling disconnected, this is generally a time when I'm not feeling very good. And so if I can remember to remember this wonderful phrase, we are all connected, all of a sudden, it's a magic phrase. I start to feel connected. First, I feel connected to myself because I've been maybe standing, 5 feet to the left. And then when I think about that, I start to feel myself moving back. And then I start to feel my position on the web and how I am connected to everything. And how this place where I'm standing is also a sacred space.
And so often at the beginning of a community healing, the ceremony or a course, one of us will often do the ceremony called rattling the circle together. And that's one example of how to create sacred space. So
yes, well, how to open up to it. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about how you do it and what happens to you when you do it and what you feel?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, when we do have retreats here, for example, our beautiful little place in the woods, often I don't really feel very much like it in those, that half hour before it actually starts. And
you don't feel like doing the work.
I don't, and
too tired,
I'm tired, and I generally don't have a headache.
No.
Gosh, I haven't had a headache for a long time. Knock on wood, and but like it just it's kind of overwhelming knowing that you're going to be stepping into the circle, right? And so then when people arrive, of course it's wonderful to see them, but still, the responsibility, which I think of as my responsibility, rightly or wrongly, probably a mixture of both. Uh, it's a little bit, I feel separate. I feel outside of myself and I don't feel connected. And so this is a really wonderful thing, this tradition we have of starting off by, we call it rattling the circle together.
Mm.
And the circle is already together, of course, but in order for us to feel the connection, right? Like we call it creating sacred space. It's not creating sacred space. The sacredness is already there. It's becoming aware of it and recognizing it and stepping into it. And this is what the Buddha does, right? I mean, he's taking one step from sacred space into another step with awareness. And this is something that those of us who haven't gotten to where the Buddha is, we have to take time to stop before we start and step into the circle. And about a long time ago, again, something 40 years or something like that, a very wonderful friend of mine in Austria introduced me to the rattle. And she told me that she used the rattle to call the spirits. And so I got a rattle, and I found out that it was a wonderful tool. The spirit of the rattle is strong, and I use it, and I call out to use a shorthand, the spirits of the four directions. I call to the spirits of the earth, the spirits of the heavens, and the spirits of all there is. And I'm asking for help to take the next step into sacred space. And my rattle ritual recipe, 3 R's, takes anywhere from 3 minutes to half an hour, right? Depending on the piece of work and the urgency. Right?
And so when you're rattling the circle together, what do you sort of experience? I mean, obviously every circle is different, but I mean, in a general way, how do you feel? Do you feel the sacred space kind of opening up? Do you feel yourself more in it?
What I think the best way for me to describe it is I feel more and more present, right? And that's the best way to describe it, really. And because all space is sacred, I mean, this is something I can't get away from that. In normal times, I managed to forget this. This is why I loved this sign that we saw so often when we were in the land of the Pueblos some years ago. We saw this sign everywhere. It said, "Remember to remember."
And as you're calling in the spirits and feeling yourself opening up to sacred space, whether that's with a circle or with yourself in your own work, my feeling is that I remember that what I'm in, the space I'm in, is so much bigger than me. So it's not just about me, it's me in a sacred space. And that for me is a really wonderful moment. I often relax and let myself go then a little bit more. I open up to the spirits a little bit more, and I can recognize them here with me. And in a way, we often talk about how we're always connected. It's just that we can't always feel it. And then I allow myself to feel it. I allow myself to be touched by that connection. And as I come into that space, and especially as I sit in circle with others, the spirits that I work with, they have said that they are very grateful about that, because that gives them the chance to sit in circle with other spirits. And I was a little surprised by this the first time they showed me this, because I thought, well, you guys can go everywhere, and why do you need this? But there is something about humans coming together and holding a space for them, for this work. And so that I literally saw it, so that there was a circle of humans, and then sort of behind that and inside it were a circle of the spirits. And as we were working, the humans were working, they were working. And I was very touched the first time I saw this and experienced this, because I felt, again, it's not all about me, it's not all about humans. That part of the reason I do this is to be in service to the spirits, is to hold space where they can come in the world and do their work as needed. So that it's not always about me, and how much I jump around and shake my rattle or wear my feathers, or, how visible I am to other humans. It's about the spaces I hold for the spirits. And that for me is more and more my work. And that is often not very visible work, but it can be very powerful. And so another way that we do on courses that we create space or hold space is through the drum. And for those of you who've tried the shamanic drum journey, whether at home or in a circle, you know that it's the sound of the drum creates, it's like the horse of the shaman that we can ride into the spirit world. But for me, the drum also very much makes space in the circle. It holds the space, it holds it very, very steady. And I've experienced this both lying down, journeying, that I can feel that the drumming kind of making this space that holds us as we leave our bodies and go off. And I've also experienced it a lot standing in the middle, drumming, because we're often at least 2, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 people drumming in the center of it if we have a big course. And I have felt that I try to very much stay in touch with the spirit of my drum as I'm drumming for others. I never journey myself, because I want to be in the center, holding that space. But I am very much in touch with the spirit of my drum, which is right over here. I wanted to join us. And my drum has taught me how to hold space with the way that I drum. So the presence that I bring to my drumming can sometimes change the space that people are journeying in. If people are having difficulty in focusing, I've started realizing, am I not being focused here? Am I really present in my drumming? Am I really rooted in the center? Am I really available for the others, for the space? Am I really holding the space with my drum? So I'm not just sort of going bang, bang, bang and thinking about, what I'm going to have for dinner. And I've realized this a lot over the years, that, while we're drumming, I can really hold the space in a more focused way by being really focused with my drum. And that can have an effect. So it's not, again, not trying to, do anything to other people. It's just making the space that they're working in a better space for working, a more kind of focused, held space.
That's right. And if we can carry that into our everyday lives and our interactions with other people, it has the same effect. Just like the woman making the food,
Mhm.
right? It's the same thing over and over again. It's sort of a very basic teaching about walking here on the earth. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, I have arrived, I am home. I have arrived, I am home. And if you carry that feeling of being at home with you, then the people who are around you are also going to feel at home, right? And so if you feel at home while you're drumming in the center of the circle, the people who are journeying, they're going to also feel at home in their journey in the spirit world.
And there's something I learned from you a long time ago, which you always used to say, the shaman, the best way of doing shamanic work is to be 100% focused and 100% relaxed at the same time. And we used to sort of have a good laugh about that. But for me, it's absolutely true. And for me, it's absolutely true about life too. And it's actually not a paradox at all, as you were talking about in the beginning. And so this way of being open like the circle and focused like the center, this is the way to be, I feel. And then this is what really allows the work to be held. It needs grounding. The spirits need us to bring and ground this work, to hold this work here, so it doesn't just sort of fly around and become ungrounded, unfocused. I really feel they need the human to hold the intention and to hold the space, and then they can do the work.
Well, it makes their work a lot easier. Otherwise, they have to produce miracles, and thank God they do every once in a while. But we're the messengers for the spirits.
The conduits.
I don't like this word conduit, but anyway, it's a very popular word nowadays. Because why not just say, we're the messengers, we go, ask for help, ask for information, and then bring it back, right? And that's getting away from the subject of sacred space.
We'll talk more about that another time. But I wanted to ask you as well is that we've been in a lot of community healing ceremonies over the years together, and also you've been in I don't know how many hundreds. And so we've also done smaller community healing ceremonies at home, but really love this way of doing healing ceremonies in a big circle in a community. And so can you talk a little bit about how it feels to you in terms of sacred space when you're in the middle with the person you're working for, and then around you you have a big circle of people who are not doing the work, but they're supporting you by bringing power in through song and rattles, but also by holding the space that you do the work in, that you and your spirits do the work in. How does that feel to you to be in that space?
Well, in a word, it feels wonderful, of course. And the thing is that I don't really feel like they're the ones who are holding the space, because I've been asking them to ask their spirit helpers for help, and they do that, and so I feel their spirit helpers around me as well. And there's no separation between them and their spirit helpers either. I remember one time I was doing a healing, and I thought I was going to do some kind of, extraction because of the nature of the very physical issue that the person had. And my healing teacher told me just to sing into her body. And I started singing, and then everybody in the circle started singing too. And the wonderful thing about that was that there was no separation. I didn't feel any separation between what I was singing and what they were singing and the spirits, and it was all very focused uh, uh, on the person that we were doing the healing work for, and it was so wonderful because that's what I feel when I'm in the center of the circle doing a healing. What I feel is a total lack of separation. Right? And this is what it is to be in sacred space. Is that just I have arrived. I am home. Right?
And it really feels like things are being woven together.
Absolutely.
So in a big basket almost.
Absolutely. A great big wonderful basket.
Yeah. And so this also, I feel, something to really do if you're doing a piece of work for yourself. And if you're doing a little ceremony, or if you're just sitting and doing a prayer or a meditation, or if you know how to do a shamanic drum journey. Over the years, I have learned more and more that what makes a piece of work powerful for me when I really need to ask for help is how I prepare for it, how I step into it. And so I've come to feel, in a way, and this is a little simplistic, but here I am, my everyday self, everyday Zara, and here is this piece of spirit work that I want to do, and when I really want to be much more open to receive what the spirits are giving me. And so I don't just going to go jump in there and suddenly this person is going to become this person. And so this space here of how I move into the work is very important for me, that preparation. And so nowadays, or for years really, I never just sort of lie down and take a journey. I really want to prepare for it. And maybe I prepare for a day, maybe I prepare for half an hour, maybe I prepare for 2 minutes. It doesn't really sometimes matter so much, but what matters is that I begin to make the space where I can fall into the arms of the spirits in a way and really allow them to come in and do their work. And so before I step into the ceremony, before I lie down and do the journey or step into the dance, then I always do a little bit of preparation work. And for me, I love to drum, I love to sing, you love to rattle, you love to play the flute. And also intention is a key part of stepping into sacred space. And so we take time and we make time for us to start to open up into the sacred space and allow that to just sort of swim around in that for a while. I have arrived, I am home. Before I begin to sort of do things, often we want to just do things, do a piece of work rather than just be in the sacred space and then feel like, now I begin to feel like I'm ready to receive, I'm ready to go and connect. But taking that time to just allow ourselves to be in the sacred space before we start to do.
Yes, and it's so very interesting. Again, what you just said just now reminds me of another aspect of that healing that I was just talking about. I had, when she was telling me the issue that she needed healing for, I was sort of automatically going into my Johnny's book of healings, right? And
your
yes,
list of
let's
techniques.
see which page are we on here, and what happens though when you do step into the sacred space. I step into that together with my healing teacher. And then my healing teacher gives me the recipe. And it's a brand new recipe, 99 times out of 100. And with her, that time was, we sang into her body for a very long period of time. I have no idea how long it was, because when you're in sacred space, time just goes away blissfully. And yeah, it's so great to get away from time, isn't it? So, and that's what happened. And it was, in fact, a very, very powerful healing for her as well. And so it's another aspect of stepping into sacred space. You're stepping into an area of trust, stepping into a place of trust. And that is, a lot of people, they wonder, is this work safe? And I always love it when people bring that up and say, is this work safe? Is life safe? Right? This is what we want. And the safety starts with us. And those of us who are doing shamanic work and working together with the spirits, we know that no matter what comes up, we have somebody that we can talk to about it, right? Okay, things do happen to us and around us that are very upsetting. This is life. We're born here, right? And I remember when I was a kid growing up in America, it was a popular tattoo for certain people was to have a tattoo that said, "Born to die," right? Born to die. Well, that's true, right? But we're also born to a whole lot more than that. But life is not safe.
And we're going to talk more about that in another talk, I think, about power and protection. But it's good thing to bring in here for a number of reasons, and we'll move into this. But I also feel very much that I don't particularly want to make my space too safe, because if I make it too safe, it can stop anything from happening. And then I just end up sort of pulling the covers over my head and hiding away from life. And I have sure done that many times in my life, and certainly when I was younger, because it felt overwhelming and I didn't feel at home enough. And so for me, through the healing work and the soul retrieval work and the empowerment work with the spirits, I feel much more home. And so I feel much more able to meet life. And I want to meet life. I don't want to shut life away or off, or shut myself away. I want to have the strength and the power to meet life. And so I very much try to think when I do work with people, shamanic work, is I don't think about holding a safe space for them, but I do think about a well-held space. And that is a slightly different thing. And I like the focus on how do I hold the space, not whether it's safe or not safe, because who's to say? Because most of the people who come for healing work, they want some kind of change. And sometimes the change means that habits are going to have to change. The shell is going to have to crack. Things are going to have to be put down. And that might feel very unfamiliar, or it might feel a little, vulnerable. But there we are. That's how change comes. So I like to really not, actually even just take away this word safe. I don't find it's that helpful sometimes. But think about, are you holding it well? Are you keeping the focus? Are you keeping the contact? Are you keeping connection? Are you trusting the spirits? That is the core of the work for me.
So I think actually, if you trust the spirits, maybe I've always seen, I don't have a tattoo. And I always thought, well, maybe if I find something I really wanted to get tattooed on me, I would get one. And now reading what Karina has written here,
Born
actually,
to fully live. Yeah, yeah.
born to fully live,
Yeah, it's a
all
pretty
right?
good one.
Or born to live,
Mm.
born to live. I'm simple. I like to cut things down. Yeah.
And the trust is also, if I bring a clear, well-formulated intention, and I have a heartfelt, clear, strong connection, and I do my bit, I take my responsibility in holding the space, then I can also trust that the spirits are there holding the space. And I can't hold the space too tightly because, again, how they're going to do their work, they might have a much bigger perspective than I do. So I got to trust them to hold the space that they need to do their work, and not sort of pull it too tight as soon as it gets a little bit unfamiliar or unexpected.
Mm. Mm.
And I remember, so I want to move a little bit more into this about, okay, so we've talked about, what is sacred space? How do we open to it? How can we call it in? How can we recognize it? But what happens when we're in it and power comes? What happens then? How do we hold the space then when it can get really strong? Because sometimes that's the whole point, that's the whole idea, especially in big healing work. And I remember years ago, we were in England doing a community healing ceremony for somebody. And you were in the middle doing the work, and I was the lead drummer. And there was a point, and everybody else was standing around singing. And there was a point quite early on when I just felt this incredible rush of power coming in to the circle. And I remember one of the assistants, she was looking over at me at that time, and she said my face just went, whoa. But it wasn't really fear, it was just feeling the incredible power rushing in, and then knowing that that's exactly what we need, not stopping it, not kind of getting afraid of it, because you learn to recognize it and you learn to trust it. Now again, this is the idea that you learn to build up a good relationship with your spirit so that you have trust, so that when the power comes, you know how to ride with it. You hold yourself not too tight and not too loose in the power, because otherwise it can't come in and do the work.
That's right. If you're going to ask for power, get ready. Get ready, because maybe it comes, right? And you think that you're going to get into your good old Chevrolet, and all of a sudden you find yourself behind the wheel of a Ferrari, right? So get ready, get ready. This is what you've asked for. Do not be afraid. It's come to you because you've asked for it. Thank it. Bring it into your body, and use it in the way that you know how to use it for. You've been asking for it. You've been asking for it. We are all beautifully powerful beyond our dreams. And most of our lives we spend holding ourselves back for some strange reason. And I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours about that, but that's not really so interesting. What's interesting is what to do when the power comes. Remember why you asked for it, and then use it.
And if it feels very powerful when it comes, ask your spirits for help to flow with the power. Ask for help to receive the power. I realized some years ago that power can feel really powerful. And somehow I thought, oh, it will just feel good, powerful, but sometimes it just feels plain powerful, and you like to say that power is the currency of the shaman. And in a way, this is something that you learn over years and years and years of practice, and you have to start somewhere, and you can't expect to fully know everything. You have to start somewhere and begin in a way, step by step, that feels all right to you, and then you can hold back a bit, step back a bit, step in again, get a teacher, try it again, learn a bit more. But this is sort of the essence, really, I feel, of working with the spirits, is that we learn how to hold power, how to flow with power. And that's something we're always learning more about.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the spirits are generally very kind, and they don't give us more power than we have need of. But sometimes we don't realize how much we need the power, right? And so my experience was that they really gave me power in small amounts as I was learning, right? And then all of a sudden, very early on in my shamanic healing career, I had a friend who was really ill, and he asked for help. And then all of a sudden, it was like the spirits shifted gears. And because my friend was really ill, I knew that he needed that power. It wasn't about me. It was power that was going through me to him. And it was very helpful.
And then you had to learn about that. They taught you a lot about that, allowing the power to flow through.
Exactly, exactly. And so this was one of my very early teachings. Let the power flow through you.
And if you feel that you're doing a piece of work and power is coming, you can ask, how should I use this power? Ask for help to let it flow. And so you can ask for help anytime during the work. So I also want to shift a little bit and say something about sacred space in nature. And actually sacred space in everyday life. And sometimes we do this work, which we like to call a medicine walk, but there are lots of different names for it. The walking journey, where you walk into nature, or you can also do it in a town or a city built up area. First time I did it in the center of London near Euston, and it was incredibly powerful. And here we cannot just sort of let go totally like we do when we're lying down on a journey and send our spirits off. But we are literally walking with one foot in each world. And that's a great practice because it helps us to create the bridge from, the spirit world and the physical world, so that we can really bring the power back and bring it into our everyday life. But sometimes I like to do that. Maybe I'm sitting in a city on a bench, or I'm waiting for something, or I'm walking down the road about to go to a job. And I just stop for a moment, and I stop and I open up, like you were saying, stop. And then I open up and I just I'm not really doing a piece of spirit work, but I'm just opening up to life, and I'm opening up to the soul that is in life, that animate life that is in everything, including the spirits, the ones that are not always visible. And it just is amazing how sacred space opens up, and sometimes interesting messages come on a truck that drives on by, or suddenly I see a sign, across the road if I'm in a city, or I hear something, or I feel like I really come into relationship with a tree or a flower or a rock or a river. And this is also sacred space, where you mentioned the time, clock time, human time, the linear time stops, and it becomes round and timeless, and we are just together with life, together with the universe. And it's such a wonderful experience to step out of that sort of human time into universal time.
Yes, and it's really necessary too, because if we don't do this, we forget about the sacredness of the earth. Right. All these appointments we have, things we have to do, places to go, people to see. Right. And when we step into the awareness of the sacred all around us all the time, it's not about spacing out. It's about being present. It's about being very, very present and feeling the sacredness of where we are and feeling that power.
And so, in a way, sacredness is all around us all the time. And here is a glass of water. And water is just one of the most amazing sacred things on this earth. It's also one of the oldest things on this earth. And one of the most amazing things about our planet is that it has managed for over 4 billion years to keep an environment that keeps water fluid. That doesn't mean that it freezes or doesn't mean that it evaporates. And that is a real feat, because there's no other place that humans know of in the universe that can do that over such a long period of time. And so the fact that water is fluid and liquid, as well as sometimes evaporating and freezing, depending on the temperatures, there is a sort of a atmospheric temperature control system, means that we can live, that everything can live. There is also air, fire, and soil, earth that needs to happen, but liquid water is really important. So how do I create sacred space? How do I step into sacred space with this water? It's just, for me, dropping into that remembrance that life is sacred, that life is always sacred if I just stop and drop into it, that I can recognize water as the sacred being it is, deeply sacred being it is. And before I drink it, I can give thanks. I can tell water how I totally depend on it. I utterly need it. I can't survive without it. And how I recognize some amazing, miraculous, mystical sacredness in it that is right here in my hand, that I drink every day, that is flowing through me. And that's one of the simplest and most powerful sacred ceremonies you can have in your life every day. At least once a day when you drink water, just open up to the incredible sacred space that is between you and the water, that is in the water as a being, and that is in you with the water. And that in itself is a very simple thing that anyone can do. And the more you do it, the more you can just feel the sacredness coming into that space that brings you together. And like you said in the beginning, it's a lot of it to do is about recognition, and recognizing what is sacred, and that the sacred is all around us. And life is so deeply sacred. And we just often rush through it and don't take the time to come into connection with it. And the more we come into connection with it, I find the more I get filled with that beautiful feeling of sacred space.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you to all of you who've been here with us today. And thank you to the technology that has brought us all together.
And remember, when you're in sacred space, remember that it's always more than human. It's always about the spirits. And remember that the sacred space is also their space, and to allow yourself to come into contact with them. So we can train ourselves to remember that it's about much more than the human perspective.
Remember to remember. Yeah.